Hi, everyone, and welcome to Getting Down to Details, how to use velocity reports to up your game on sourcing local food. This webinar is co-hosted by the New England Farm and Sea to Campus Network, as well as Farm to Institution New England, and we're thrilled to have you here today. This is the first webinar in our mini-series designed for campuses, K-12 schools, hospitals, and other types of institutions around New England and beyond, designed to help you source more local food and support your local economy and all the benefits that come along with local food. So I would first like to introduce myself. I'm Caitlin Haskins, the Communications Coordinator for Farm to Institution New England. I'd like to mention a couple of interactive features you can use throughout the webinar to interact with panelists and with everyone who's participating in the webinar today. First off, we've got our chat feature, which you can use to message individual panelists, to message everyone, and ask us your questions throughout. We also have the Q&A feature, which we'll turn our attention to at the very end of the webinar today. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A bar in Zoom, and we'll answer those at the end of the webinar today. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So I'm down in the bottom right, Caitlin, and we've also got Dana Stevens, who's the event and project manager for FINE, who will be doing a little introduction for us, followed by Mike Webster, who's the general manager at the Hotchkiss School down in Connecticut. And he'll be doing the bulk of our presentation today, looking at velocity reports and giving us a primer as an introduction. And then Rachel Harb will continue. She's our training and events coordinator for Mass Farm to School, which is one of our key partners in Massachusetts. And she'll give a case study on Chicopee Public Schools and share some lessons she's learned over the years. So as I said, we'll start with a brief introduction, move on to Velocity Reports 101, talk about some lessons we've learned, do a Q&A, and then Dana will conclude for us. So now I'd like to pass it over to Dana Stevens to do an introduction and share a little more information about who we are.
Thanks, Caitlin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to briefly talk about how this webinar came about and the different groups that are involved, and then we'll get into the juicy details with Mike and Rachel. So Farm to Institution New England is a 6-state network of nonprofit, public, and private entities, and we work together to transform our food system by increasing the amount of local food served in our region's schools, hospitals, colleges, and other institutions. We do this work collaboratively as a network of nonprofit organizations, government agencies, institutions, funding partners, foundations, farms, food distributors, up and down the supply chain, food processors, food service operators, and many other partners. Our main mission is to mobilize the power of institutions to transform our food system. And our primary goal is to get more local food on the menu at institutions across our region. As I mentioned, one of the institutional sectors we focus on is the campus sector. And one of the ways that we support this institutional sector is through the Farm and Sea to Campus network. This network is a community of higher education and food system stakeholders from New England, and they connect to share and collaborate and develop transparent regional supply chains, while also educating campus communities about regional food systems. So that Farm and Sea to Campus network operates via a 6-member steering committee that supports 4 working groups right now, each of which meets once a month. And you can learn more about the groups and their ongoing projects on our website, and we'll give you the links to those at the end of the webinar. But one of these working groups focuses on supply chain development, and that group is responsible for putting together this Getting Down to Details webinar series, of which this is the first installment. Mike Webster, who you will hear from next, is a co-chair of that working group and a member of the Farm and Seed at Campus Network Steering Committee. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Mike.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Webster. I'm the General Manager of Dining Services here at the Hotchkiss School in Lakeville, Connecticut. I'm a chef by trade, but have been working as a general manager the last few years, really trying to make some changes for the food system here in New England. What I'm talking to you today a little bit about is velocity reports, which I believe to be one of the key pieces in beginning to make food shifts within campuses is understanding what you're currently purchasing and where your opportunities lie. So a little bit about Hotchkiss Dining. We are a Real Food Challenge school. We're one of the few prep schools that participates in the Real Food Challenge. And the goal of the Real Food Challenge is to achieve 20% real food by 2020. And real is defined by several different items. Is it local, environmentally conscious, sustainable, etc. And all their details can be found here at realfoodchallenge.org. We are very proud to have a 60% Real Food Challenge score as of last academic year or fiscal year 17. We currently purchase 100% of our land-based proteins from small family farmers within a 250-mile radius, so very proud of our ability to help support a lot of New England farmers. We do have a 280-acre campus right here on campus where our students actually work on the farm during the fall and the spring sports. And currently our farm produces about 6.5% of our annual produce for the year. We have a $1.2 million food budget here at Hotchkiss, and we currently spend $700,000 of that, or again 60%, within our 100-mile community. And we have maintained a flat per student operating budget, which means that as our student population fluctuates, our dollars per student stays the same. And so we believe this is a model that will encourage others to be able to rethink the way that they're running their own dining departments. So the secret to getting ahead is getting started. It's a famous quote from Mark Twain. I think the reason that I wanted to talk to you all today about velocity reports is that it's one of the key tools to really begin to understand where your department currently is in its purchasing and where ultimately you want to go. And that's going to depend on your institution as well as the administrators and faculty members and community at large, what their opinions of good, wholesome food is. But velocity reports are a great way to get a better insight into your program as a whole. So a little bit about velocity reports. Number one is what they are. Essentially what a velocity report is a report that shows your purchases from a given vendor. So say it's Cisco Albany or PFG, US Foods, any of those broadline vendors. Any of your vendors really should be able to produce a velocity report for you. And it's basically just a report showing what you've purchased within a given period. And so that period could be per month, per quarter, per year, depending on what you're looking to do. I generally like monthly or annual velocity reports to be able to use. And so if you are a food service contractor, like a Sodexo, Aramark, Compass Group, Culinart, anybody like that, you're going to have proprietary software that you're doing most of your ordering through. And that's going to be able to make your life a little bit easier because the reporting process is all very standardized throughout your software tools. So if you're using proprietary software, you're going to want to run your velocity reports through there and then begin to critically analyze those numbers. If you're a self-op school, you're going to want to request this. Generally via email is the easiest way to do it. I like everything to be in Excel. Oftentimes when it's in PDF form, it's more challenging to be able to manage. But in Excel, you can change it and apply filters for a variety of ways to be able to sort your information to be more usable. So obtaining that velocity report is step one, working with those vendors to understand what you're buying, how much of it at any given time is going to be really important. So this is an example. I chose chicken as my example here. So this is a snapshot of what my velocity report looks like. Shows you, what the items are. Are they 6-ounce breasts or are they random? Is it a whole chicken or is it just the wing? And it shows me, based on dollars spent and total quantity, I can begin to get an understanding of what my capacity is in my current budget for chicken. And so by understanding how much I'm buying, it's going to be able to give me an idea of, is this a viable food shift item or not? Oftentimes when you're running these reports, they come in alphabetical order. You're going to want to begin to filter those down. I like total spend as a good filter to see what my number one most expensive item is on that report, because oftentimes the thing you spend the most money on, or the highest volume item, is probably not the best one to begin looking at campus food shift strategies for. Oftentimes it's the middle of the page or even the bottom of the page, things that you don't go through a tremendous amount of that are great opportunities to begin to switch over. It also is going to depend a lot on your local economy. What is being produced locally for you? How do you define local? Here in New England, 100 miles gets you pretty far. Those of you in the South or Midwest, 100 miles might not even get you to the next county. And so having a better understanding for what your personal standards are for what local or regional are going to help you to begin to identify what breadth or what scope you're going to be looking at for producers. So now that you've got the data, it's really important that you're able to do something actionable with that data, right? So we talked about filtering those items based on volume. You may want to look at case usage, something you're going through a lot of, or you may want to look at dollar usage. Ultimately, they're going to have some correlation, but you want to be able to identify your low volume, high variance items like jelly. Jelly was something that we shifted here at Hotchkiss a few years ago. We wanted to get away from high fructose corn syrup, and we were looking at other organic options to be able to make that switch. Because we don't go through much jelly throughout the course of the year, even though it costs me more money per pound than would ordinarily be acceptable, because we don't buy a whole lot of it, the total cost to the department was reasonably minimal. And so it made sense from an ethical perspective to go ahead and move forward with that switch. Whereas high volume, low variance items are things like chicken that you're going to be going through a very large amount of, and your variance is going to be reasonably small or even negative. So in my case, buying local chicken actually turned out to save me money, but in many cases, that's not always going to be the case. And so looking at where your supply chain is being influenced and how much volume you're going through a given item is going to give you an idea of what is a manageable task to be able to take on. Ultimately, this is an exercise that you're going to want to rinse and repeat on. You're going to want to continue to run your velocity reports throughout the year to gauge your volume and see how the market costs are fluctuating throughout that year as well. It may be that when I did my comparison on chicken, the market was high and the market has since come back down, or vice versa. So having a good regular check-in with those velocity reports is going to be very important. So crunching the numbers, our volume versus variance. So here I've created a small Excel sheet. It shows what I was buying from my traditional vendor, the case weight, the price per case, and then ultimately the price per pound. And then I have this on a variance with what the local options would be. Same thing with the case weight, the price per case, and ultimately the price per pound. And I always like to date these, because oftentimes I will go back and review these numbers and input, the current data. And so it's important to have a point of reference for what you're looking for. And here you can see there's a pretty distinct cost difference from a lot of my products. And so this food shift item seems to make sense at this point, but I need to make sure that my forecasted savings does come to materialize as actual savings. So I've now identified through that last exercise where I can begin to find savings in my regularly sourced items. I know I'm going to be going through a lot of chicken, and so the savings to me is significantly valuable to the operation of the department. And I want to go ahead and begin to test this. So we're going to start looking at our actual savings and our actual usage from what our forecasted savings and usage were. Oftentimes when you're making a switch like this, you're going to need to make sure that you have good marketing and good things going on to support that transition within your community. You want to make sure that your students understand what you're doing, that your customers and clients appreciate the value that you're adding to their program. And so the consumption goes up. When we switched over from liquid egg to our shell eggs that we now crack in-house, we started a pretty decent marketing campaign around it and sent out videos of our egg centrifuge to show the students the difference in the quality of their eggs. And immediately my consumption spiked. Now it was new, it was fun, it was different. And so shortly thereafter, it returned back to its normal state and has flatlined in terms of consumption. But it's always important to be able to compare your forecasts to your actuals. Just like in any other financial accounting practices, when we're beginning to make financial decisions on our forecasted shifts, we want to make sure that the actual savings is present with that. And one of the last questions that I like to ask myself when switching from a commodity product to a local product is, where are my dollars going? When I support a local farmer, the power of that dollar is stronger than the power of the dollar that I'm purchasing from a vendor or distributor. And so even though my vendors and my distributors are absolutely crucial to my success in being able to purchase food items, it's important to understand where my dollars are going so that I can have a greater appreciation for the economic impact or the contribution that we're making to the community. Anytime you're negotiating direct with your producers, again, that power of the dollar is stronger. So when I'm buying apples from a local farmer and I give them $1 for their apples, they keep that full dollar. Whereas when I buy local apples from a distributor, the power of that dollar is lessened depending on the ownership interest of that institution. And so I really like the buying directly from producers when possible, and when all of the proper safety protocols are in place to make sure that insurance and liability and legal teams are content with the risk assessment. So identifying your buying power is important, because when you're negotiating directly with these farmers or these producers, you need to be able to give them an idea of how much you need to produce. Institutions of our size often are in lockstep with the global supply chain. And so when you're talking to a local farmer, he may sell 100 pounds of apples at a farmer's market and think that he's doing quite well. So when we say we need 250 pounds and we need them every week, that's something that we're going to need to be able to forecast out for that farmer so that they can plan appropriately to make sure that they've got the product. And working with the producers is a really important give and take relationship. But what it allows for is meaningful negotiations around fair pricing practices for your foods. When you know the person that's producing it and you get to understand their values and their ethics, not only is it nice to be able to support them, but you need to make sure that you have fair pricing intact. We want to make sure that you're paying them fair market value, that you're not paying too much, and that they're not making too little. Because if your farmer goes out of business, you lose your opportunity to have that product. And so looking at that relationship as a really crucial one to be able to understand the longevity of production from a local perspective. Always leveraging bulk buy opportunities when possible. A lot of our vendors are really great about communicating with us when they have too much in their freezer and they're looking to move something. We want to be able to negotiate with them. If you have the storage capacity, you want to be able to make that happen for them. And oftentimes you can leverage your volume to a financial advantage. And so I would encourage you to always ask for a bulk buy opportunity whenever you're dealing directly with producers. So do a gut check. This is similar to what we talked about earlier. As you're beginning this process, it's important to always do the guess and check. So you constantly want to review your variances of your projected costs or projected usage versus your actual costs. Using production reports in your dining room is really important. Seeing what the chefs are making, monitoring how much is being pulled or utilized or managed from a production standpoint is a great way to see some insight for this. But ultimately, you need to be able to draw financial conclusions on the cost of this transition. And so depending on what the item is, if it's positive or negative in terms of an operational cost, it's really important to manage this fairly closely, especially in the beginning. You always want to continue to look for opportunities. We've been doing this here at Hotchkiss for many years now, and we continue to revisit and revalue our relationships to make sure that we're continuing to look for opportunities to be able to have really great quality food in a safe and healthy manner. So this is an ongoing process. And bottom line for me is that local chicken was a win-win. We estimate that our forecasted savings was around $37,000. So from being able to look at what our volume was, being able to make commitments to our vendor, and being able to estimate our usage, we were able to come up with an opportunity to save some money that we were then able to reintegrate into the program. And so by buying local chicken, we were able to save enough money to then go ahead and afford those jellies that cost, again, significantly more on that top end. So looking for ways to save money and then in turn be able to spend that money is a really great way to continue to operate. And with that, I will pass it on.
Thanks, Mike. So I think you really hit the nail on the head talking about the 101 of velocity reports. And what I'm going to try to do is kind of supplement all the great information that you provided and talk a little bit about my own experience with running velocity reports and turning them into local food audits. So just to begin, I just want to explain that in addition to my role with Mass Farm to School, I also am currently serving as a Farm to School coordinator for Chicopee Public Schools food service. And I do a lot of data mining for Chicopee schools, and I analyze that data. I write school lunch menus with seasonal focus, and I'm often serving as a go-between between farmers and vendors and distributors. I've run several local food audits for school districts in Massachusetts. So that's my area of expertise. And I will say that all of these districts that I've worked with have been self-operated. So that might make a difference for some of you who are working with food service management companies. And I'm also taking the perspective of someone who's not an employee of each of the school districts, but rather someone who's coming from the outside. And so a lot of the talking points I have here have to do with being someone who's looking for this information, but is not the decision maker within food services. That being said, if you are a food service director, it's going to be all the more easy for you to access this information. So yeah, so I'm going to get started here. Looks like the slides don't want to change. Okay, here we go. All right. Apologies, everyone. Not sure why the slides aren't moving, but if someone has control over it, would you mind? Okay, great. So starting with my lessons learned, the first thing I always tell people is to define your local or regional or sustainable. So it's going to be values-based, and it's not going to necessarily be the same for every district. It's going to just really depend on what values you hold for what you want to call local. So for example, in my work with Chicopee Public Schools, we talked about prioritization. So we prioritize Massachusetts grown and raised, and then looking outward to regional, then we count whatever we can source within the New England states or within 250 miles in alignment with the Real Food Challenge definition of local. And similarly, we also are connected with the Food Solution New England's 50 by 60 campaign. So we're really trying to take what we do on a municipal level and make sure that we're connecting with larger visions such as 50 by 60, where the New England states intend to be sourcing 50% of its own food by the year 2060. So if you don't have these things defined, then how do you really know what you're measuring? The second lesson I've learned is that milk is a special case. And it's special because the milk industry is local or regional by nature. So there's a cute video on the New England Dairy and Food Council website that shows farm to you within 48 hours. And so it shows how when milk comes from the cows, it gets to you in a grocery store all within 48 hours. And so it's really not traveling very far. And this might be true for the rest of the country, but I'm not sure. So this is something that's definitely true for New England. So it can be fine to count milk as local in your total, but consider separating it out from what you're counting as local food. Partly because fluid milk for a school district accounts for such a large percentage of the total food and beverage budget. And the quantity doesn't fluctuate very much year to year. And so we like to, in the Chicopee schools, separate out what we're buying as local food from total local, including fluid milk, because the difference is so stark. So we like to say 16% annual local food, but 29% total, including fluid milk. And then the last thing is that baseline audits tend to show that we're buying less local than we think at the beginning. So when I ask folks to estimate off the top of their head how much local they think they're spending, I've heard 20, 25%, 30%. And then when I've actually looked into the data, excluding fluid milk, a lot of times it's coming in at 1% or less. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's good to know so that we can do something about it. And I say that to not be discouraged if you're running a baseline audit for the first time, because it's really common not to be sort of inadvertently sourcing local. More often than not, you're going to be sourcing food from all over the country. So I wanted to give some thoughts about how to request a velocity report. So one strategy that I use is when I'm meeting with a food service director is getting a list of all the vendors and distributors that the district sources from and a contact for each one. So I understand that a food service director has so much on their plate that running this kind of data reports and doing the correspondence is a ton of work. So as an outside collaborator, I often offer to serve that role myself. And so I do a lot of the outreach and have been successful where it's a partnership, where the food service director is at least CC'd on email correspondences to put the vendor at ease sharing the data with me. So when I reach out, I ask for an aggregated velocity report. As Mike explained, it's a good way of taking the total amount of dollars that you spent on each item plus the description and give them clear dates to run. I usually use a full fiscal year when I run audits. So for those of you who come back to this webinar at another date, I just included here some sample outreach wording for emails. And basically I try to phrase it in a way where vendors are not going to view it as a gotcha moment, because it's really not. I'm not trying to accuse anyone or attack anyone. I'm just trying to let them know that as a district, we are prioritizing local or sustainable food products, and that we're just trying to get a sense of how much we're spending now so that we can begin a conversation and hopefully a more rich partnership with the distributor that we're working with. Okay, so once you have the velocity reports, you scan through all of the products and pick out the local ones. So one thing I've learned just by looking at so many velocity reports is that the prepared products are usually not local, or at least are not verifiable. So right away, a lot of your prepared soups and whatever else are probably not going to be local. So that's something that I don't often investigate every single line item, because it's typically not local. Unless it says so specifically. Sometimes a local soup or something will say local or organic based on the distributor's definition. So a place that I suggest investigating are the whole ingredients. So produce, eggs, and meat, and dairy products. They're easier to trace back to origin because there are fewer ingredients. It's common to do a lot of research, especially at the beginning, just until you get comfortable with scanning at a glance and being able to pick out off the top of your head what you know is local. Oh, and finally, subtract any non-food items from your total food budget. You don't want to count them as local or non-local, just don't count them at all. So I'll show you what I mean. Here's an example of a velocity report that we ran, just a segment of it for the Chicopee schools. And what I do is I look through all of the items and then I actually highlight the ones that are non-food or that are local. So that's what I've done here. And then by the end of the report, I just kind of tally up all of the totals. So how much we spent, how much of it was non-food, and so how much was your total food budget, and how much was spent locally within this velocity report. So after you've taken a look through the velocity report, I want to talk a little bit about how to turn it into something that's more useful for you, which I call a local food audit. So take this data and put it into a pretty Excel chart. Actually, the pretty is optional, but I like to make it pretty just to make it easier and more fun to look at. So the point is to know how much of your dollars were spent on all food and only food, not non-food, and then how much of it was spent on local foods. And then you can calculate the percent local for each vendor and then for the total at the end. For those of you who are investigating a local food audit as an outside collaborator, one thing that I think I would recommend is just having a conversation with the food service director at the very beginning and asking off the top of their heads, do they know what to look out for that is local? Maybe it's a yogurt producer, as was the case with Chicopee. They happen to know that some of their yogurt was local, and had I not known that, I wouldn't necessarily have known to look. It's a little blurry here, but so this is a table that I developed in Excel, and I just pulled out some of the important information for myself. So the origin of the ingredients, where the product was processed, the vendor name, and total that we spent with each distributor or vendor, and I parsed out how many total dollars were spent, and then I have a column here for percent local for each one. And so when I fill it out, it looks something like this. This gives me a lot of information. So for example, we have a small distributor company called Arnold's Meats located in Chicopee Schools who was already delivering to all 15 of our schools. And before they started carrying local products, we were only buying deli meat from them. Over the last year, we were adding small amounts of local food that developed into larger amounts of local food, where we needed some more infrastructure to get its source to the Chicopee schools. So we invited Arnold's Meats to carry the product for us and deliver it to our schools. And as a result, we increased our spending with them by over $100,000 just last year. And that bumped our percent local up from basically 0 to 70% in just 1 year. So that was a really clear example of a partnership that developed really nicely over the local food economy. Another thing I do is, in addition to showing what each vendor and distributor, how much local we bought from them, I also just kind of keep a more detailed log of what those products actually were, because I may not be the one running the food audit next time, and so I want to make sure that whoever's coming next can see which products it actually was that we were sourcing. And it also shows at a glance where there are opportunities for improvement. So what is missing from this list? What are we not spending very much of that we could be spending more of? And some of my closing thoughts is that the data doesn't have to stop at the velocity reports. So one thing that we do in Chicopee is whenever we run an audit, we also compare it to our projected local spending, or where we hope to be and how much we hope to be growing year after year. So it allows us to compare us to where we hoped we would be, but also it allows us to set a goal for the next fiscal year spending. So let's say we want to spend an additional $20,000 per year, and we want to figure out how we're going to meet that goal. So projecting out is one way to do this. So let's say we're thinking about adding a local applesauce. And so we can calculate how much applesauce we go through if, let's say, if we were to order it one time a month for every school in our district. So we just do a quick calculation of how much that would be, how much it would cost. Turns out we're adding $1,500 per month, and over the full school year, that's $15,000, which is 3/4 of our way towards our $20,000 goal for the end of the year. So that's really huge, and it goes to show that even small changes like one local product, one time per month at all of your schools can really make a huge impact by the end. So just to conclude, knowing the data is powerful. The velocity reports can point you in the right direction and help you decide how you want to spend your money, and it can also help you tell your story. So you can do this, and I'm here to help. If you are attempting this and you have any questions about what to do with this or that product, feel free to reach out. I'm very happy to help. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rachel and Mike, for that detailed overview of velocity reports and taking a look at how they've helped you to leverage your local spend and make the most of your budget. We're going to go ahead and move into the Q&A section now. We'll spend a few minutes fielding questions. So if you've got questions you've thought of over the course of the webinar, feel free to put them in the Q&A feature, which you can find in your black toolbar. We do have one question so far. I'm going to go ahead and read it for you all. Regarding values, do you have any experience tracking the size and the scale of the farm? This person is from California, and they said some of what gets captured as local can actually come from very large corporate farms or from local packing houses that get tracked as local purchases. They said, we've been considering how to gather data on products coming from small and mid-scale producers as a subset of local. Do you have any thoughts on this? I think Mike is going to go ahead and answer this question.
I do. We have similar challenges with bakeries, right? We have local organic bakeries that are using really awesome ingredients and doing things the right way. And then we have local commodity bakeries that are still using commodity flour and more commodity ingredients. And so what we do is try to look a little bit past the just simply the origin of where the item is coming from and more of the know your farmer route or know your producer. And so things that are produced on a large corporate farm, while they may be geographically local, don't necessarily represent the local values that you're trying to represent. And so it's really important to have kind of an ethics statement around what you believe local to be, and so that you can define out, that local commodity does not mean as much value to you as local real, quote unquote real.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. Do you want to add anything, Rachel?
You know, I think about that question a lot too. I go back and forth and how I feel about it personally, but it's going to be an institution to institution decision. And sometimes I think about, for the dairy example, I think ideally we'd be looking at the small to mid-sized farms, and a lot of times where we get the milk cartons comes from an aggregation of lots of family farms, which is all located within our local definition. And then sometimes I think about it, the same company aggregates the milk and then they create products that are distributed and sold nationwide, and then it starts to feel a little bit bigger than local, and it is an interesting thing to ponder over. So I'm curious to continue that conversation with other people too and hear their thoughts.
Great. Okay. Thanks, you guys. Jacqueline Boyer is wondering about tracking unit size. So they say one challenge is tracking unit size for all the different items. Is there a gold standard you can direct me to where I can see how the industry packages and sells items that are sold to schools? Talking about tracking unit size.
Really no exact gold standard for this. I think there's some commonality that's found in distribution, but oftentimes the global food system is really looking at packaging and transportation efficiencies. So being able to find ways to fit the most amount of product into the smallest amount of space. So in terms of tracking size, I think, pounds and dollars are two really good ways to be able to track that. But in terms of pack sizes, those are really going to be determined by the global supply chain.
Yeah, okay. Anything to add, Rachel?
Yeah, I wish that there was more standardization of pack size. I've definitely done a lot of calculations of total case weight just based on, just like case by case size. So I've just had to do a lot of legwork, honestly, to get to the point where I know how much is contained in each case.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
And pack size can be a real challenge, especially when you're looking for velocity reports that are going to come in a variety of different forms with different information depending on the company. So, when you're requesting a velocity report, it is important that you do get, things by pound or by case, or that the case does have an equivocal value. Oftentimes things that come in like number 10 cans can really vary in terms of their weight. And so again, being able to read a little bit deeper into what the pack size really is.
Yep. Okay. Great. Next up, Gregory Wolf is wondering for Mike, did you have any problems persuading Sodexo Central Purchasing to let you buy outside of the normal vendors? Also, are they working with you to make these Real Food Challenge vendors available to other accounts?
Yes and yes. I would say that the Central Purchasing for Sodexo has been incredibly patient and kind and been a wonderful partner for us. But the nature of the account here at Hotchkiss, the client is incredibly demanding. And so I think they probably are a little more primed to want to make these things available for the sake of pleasing the client. But Sodexo has been a wonderful partner to Hotchkiss, and we've really found no obstacles, real legitimate obstacles. There's always paperwork and time and explaining up kind of that hierarchy of why we need this certain product or why the client values this product. But overall, we have not had any concrete no's for a single product. And I think that there's constant growth within the company for looking for opportunities to be able to bring in more Real Food Challenge vendors. Sodexo had a great conference a little less than a year ago that was really aimed at small producers, and teaching them and training them what the company is looking for to be able to bring their product to market. So there's been some great educational outreach. There's been a really great learning curve within the corporate structure as a whole, that there are ways to be able to, have exceptions and bring in special products. And I think that's only going to become more and more popular as more and more schools continue to want to make these shifts.
Yeah, let's hope so. All right. Great. Next, we have a question from Annie Rowell. She said, for your tracking system, once you have your velocity report, is any of your analysis process automated? And also for the audit, what is the time period you perform the audit for? For either of you?
No, I don't think any of it's really automated. Once you've gone through the exercise with a vendor, it becomes increasingly easy to manage it time over time because now they know what you're looking for. But I generally look for an audit either on a monthly or an annual basis. I like annual to be able to see big picture, and I like month over month to be able to do that compare and contrast of what my forecasted versus my actuals really are.
Great. Okay. Rachel, any thoughts?
Yeah, the process that I use is also not automated. I have heard that some people have, software connected to NutriKids, for example, that can allow you to process this information more quickly, although I don't have access to that software right now. So I just do it just manually through the Excel doc that I created, and then I just kind of pre-enter in formulas so that it kind of spits out the percentages automatically. So it's not running a local food audit is not time consuming because it's just plugging in the numbers. The time consuming part is tracking down velocity reports from each distributor, partly because they're busy too, you know, and so there's so getting the information to you, and then sometimes it comes in unconventional formats. It's really lucky if you're working with a distributor who can give you an Excel doc that you can edit and play with, but sometimes you get PDFs and it's all they can do. Or I've gotten a thick printout before on really old printer paper that was just bizarre. Yeah, so it can take a little bit of manual labor to get it done.
Okay, thanks you guys. Next up, Alicia Clayton is wondering if there's a website she can go to find the farms that qualify in her area.
Unfortunately, not to my knowledge at this time. There are a variety of websites that are great resources for finding local farms and local products, but they're really going to depend on your specific region. But I think that is an opportunity within the marketplace for there to be more discussion around what are the criteria of certain farms, what it is that you're looking for. So to bring it back to, you know, what your kind of local criteria are, that's going to really be the first step. You know, I've got local farms in my area that are you know, producing cows, but they're producing them in a more conventional way, and not necessarily in the way that I'm, you know, looking to support local agriculture. And so sometimes just having a list of farms that produces beef is not nearly as valuable as a list of farms that are producing beef that are going to meet your standards. And I would really just encourage you to go to farmers markets, meet the farmers, meet the people, go to the farms, have conversations. But the more you know your farmer, the more articulate you're going to be about making those food shifts.
Mike, do you find that all the farmers you work with also direct market?
I find most of my farmers don't direct market anymore. There are a fair amount of them that have started. My relationships with most of our farmers have been going on for a few years now. And I think for some of our farms, we've really become their bread and butter, to where they've scaled back on their farmers markets because of the amount of input and time that it takes for them to successfully run them, whereas we're giving them more of a guaranteed salary for the product that they produce. Yeah,
interesting. Okay, cool. Rachel, any thoughts on the website or a place where people can find information about farms that qualify or that could sell them good food?
I would recommend going to local or food trade shows, especially if there are any local trade shows. I've found some that way. Mike's really spot on with it being a lot of it just word of mouth and calling farms or food producers and having the conversation. Just, would you consider selling this amount of volume at this price? A lot of those conversations lead to interesting and unorthodox partnerships. Sometimes your distributors could also have the conversation with them and see what they're up for, and if they know off the top of their heads that they have local products or sustainable products available, so long as it meets your definition.
Definitely. Okay. Next up, Megan Thompson is wondering, as an outside party or local auditor, do you ever run into resistance from vendors around providing those velocity reports, or do you struggle to get them to identify the local products on the reports? They found that many vendor systems are not set up with local identification in mind.
Yeah, I don't really ask them when I run an audit to identify local, because similarly, when I've had that conversation, we've had a mismatch of definition, and or maybe they don't do the research as in depth as I would want. So if a distributor is saying a local product simply is produced or sold within the state of Massachusetts, then I would also want to investigate the product and figure out where they're sourcing their local ingredient or their ingredients from. And oftentimes it's the ingredients themselves are not local. So I end up doing a lot of Googling and just researching the companies that I think might be local. And that's why I said, for prepared products, highly processed products, very, very unlikely that that's going to be a local product if what you're looking for is defining local as grown and processed within a certain region.
So I also kind of have some challenges with this, particularly around large broadline vendors that are not set up for systems like that. Our produce company here, FreshPoint, does a great job of indicating regional, but a lot of times it's, again, just looking a little bit deeper, Googling, beginning to start that kind of research. And one of the things I want to emphasize is, I think Rachel and I have presented this as hopefully easy and approachable. It does take a decent amount of initial legwork to gather some of the information. And one of the ways that I've found to structure my schedule to be able to help with that is within an academic setting, there are downtimes. And so using a day or two during Thanksgiving break or during Christmas break or spring break to kind of do some of this heavy lifting for the data can be monumentally refreshing. One, it's something a little bit different than the day-to-day grind, but two, are kind of uninterrupted, quiet time to be able to gather information. And when you're able to do that, you have a lot more power to be able to springboard change when you are open and running around and pressed for time. So just to kind of give a tip or an idea of time management is to use those downtimes. One thing I did want to mention just quickly, I know we have a number of people here from Massachusetts. And so if you're looking for community resources, there's the CISA, which is Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture, or buylocalfood.org. And they're a great community to be able to get involved with. I think they've got a meet and greet coming up at Northampton Brewery on December 11th. So if any of you are in Massachusetts or in that area and wanting to meet up with other cool people that are looking to do similar things and trying to support sustainable agriculture, I would encourage you to go to that meeting.
Great. Okay, thanks, Mike and Rachel. To follow up on that, one of our participants on the webinar says that farmers market managers can also be a really great resource. And the employees working at a farm stand might not be representing the full farm operation. So the farmers market manager can be a good resource. This is your last chance to ask any questions. So if you've got one, go ahead and type it in the box right now. I want to take a moment to thank Mike and Rachel for helping us plan this webinar and take time to participate in it today and share their knowledge and experience with you all. Quick note, this beautiful photo is from the University of New Hampshire in one of their recent local seafood dinners, where they source local seafood from the coast and serve it to their students and campus community. So let's see, one more question. What marketing campaigns do you use in your school to get kids interested and involved in local and sustainable agriculture?
Our marketing and propaganda campaign is kind of ongoing. We work with a couple different student groups on campus. We are heavily represented in diversity and inclusion conversations about ways that we can continue to bring in different cultural or ethnic foods. So it's a great way to kind of meet the kids wherever they are in their food journey. And I think that's the most important thing, is making it approachable to the students.
Yeah.
In the Chicopee schools, we identify the local products both on the menus and on the serving line. We signed up for Mass Farm to Schools Harvest of the Month promotional program, which for those not in Massachusetts, Massachusetts has identified a harvest of each month that's readily available and encourage schools to have the promotional posters and trading cards available, and then have the kids kind of see the ingredient reflected in their school meals. And our schools happen to have food corps service members who run taste tests that coordinate with the harvest of the month. So if it's a potato month, then they'll try a new recipe with potatoes in it, and it's so much fun for the kids to try the new foods because they're actually experiencing it and learning something about the flavor of local. And a number of our schools also have school gardens where they're out planting or harvesting the veggies that they then see in the cafeteria and learn about in the classroom. So I would think a pretty solid promotional campaign is not just within the cafeteria, but it's really integrated throughout community, the classroom, and beyond.
Yeah, for sure. And for those not in Massachusetts, I'm sure you have a local Harvest of the Month program, or you can start one in your own state or community. Thanks, you guys. Okay, another question. How were you able to buy local chicken? And do you have a large amount of chicken or large number of chicken farms in your area?
So poultry is one of the challenges here in New England. Unfortunately, we do not have adequate slaughterhouse facilities that are USDA certified here in New England. So pretty much all New England farmers are required to go to Rhode Island, Vermont, or New York. Where we are in the world, in Lakeville, Connecticut, is right on the border of Massachusetts and New York. So our 100 miles captures a decent amount of space. It happens to be that the company we work with, which is Hudson Valley Chicken, is one of those USDA certified third-party audited slaughterhouses. And so we were able to work with them to better manage their supply, buying things that are out of contract or the damaged birds, number 2 chicken, so to speak, as well as allowing them to be able to harvest the chickens and the turkeys that we raise on our own farm. We got a little bit lucky. It happened to be an alumni associated business, but that was not really what started the conversation. What started the conversation was, how can your business help our business? We were able to buy, again, their overproduction at a price that was valuable to us. And so we kind of got lucky with the local chicken. But it is a great example of ways to think outside the box in terms of affording local food.
Great. Okay. And with that, I'm going to close the Q&A section and move it on to our conclusion and pass it over to Dana Stevens to wrap it up today.
Thanks, Caitlin. Just want to echo gratitude to Mike and Rachel today for sharing some real life examples of what this process looks like on the back end and what those changes can really do for the food service at their institutions and the community beyond. I think it's really inspiring to learn about how much data exists already out there with these velocity reports and how we can use that information to really empower and inform good local purchasing decisions. So thank you both. For those of you attending the webinar today, we really hope that this has given you some tools and strategies for identifying how to increase local purchases at your institution or institutions that you are supporting as an external collaborator. We have a few invitations for you. If you have more questions about this topic or suggestions for future webinars, we would love to hear them, and we hope that we can continue to support your efforts to purchase more local product based on those suggestions. So please get in touch with us. Our website is here on the screen, and you can also email us at campus@farm2inst.org. Make sure that you're signed up for our newsletters. We have both a Farm to Institution New England newsletter and a Farm and Sea to Campus network newsletter if you are in the college sector. You will learn about future webinars and other opportunities to engage through those platforms. And there's also an opportunity to get involved with the Farm and Sea to Campus network working groups if you're interested in that. And there's a link here for you to visit as well. Finally, this webinar has been recorded, and it will be available on our website in the next few days, and we'll also be sending out a link to the recording to you all and everyone that has registered for this webinar, along with a survey to collect some feedback from you, which we really hope you'll take a couple minutes to fill out. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.